please. Do you swear from the testimony you will give today in the matter of the state of Georgia versus Jose Ibarra will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please take a seat. State and spell your first and last name.
Ashley Hinkle, Ashley Hinkle.
Where are you employed?
I'm employed at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Division of Forensic Sciences in the Forensic Biology section in Decatur, Georgia.
How long have you been working there?
Approximately 18 years.
What is your title and your duties and responsibilities?
I'm a crime lab scientist. My duties and responsibilities include analyzing evidence for the presence of bodily fluids. If those are present, I attempt to obtain a DNA profile and compare that profile to reference sampled profiles that are collected directly from an individual. I'm also trained in a software program to analyze complex mixtures called TrueAllele.
What is your education and your training that qualifies you for your job?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from East Carolina University and a Master's of Science in Forensic Science from Marshall University. I have extensive in-house training at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the National Forensic Science Technology Center. I have continuing education and proficiency testing on a yearly basis. I also have a approximately 1 year training initially in the TrueAllele software.
And that is initially, when were you first trained on the TrueAllele software?
2017.
How long was that training and what did it consist of?
It was approximately a year. It consisted of, we had a presentation from Dr. Perlin, who is the creator of the TrueAllele software. We read literature on TrueAllele and videos that were available. We had mock samples of known mixtures with known contributors, and we performed the testing from start to finish on those mock samples.
And so just to explain a little bit about that process, would that be like you taking my DNA and your DNA, mixing it together so you know it's mine and you know it's yours, and you know at what levels we both contributed, you would then test it in TrueAllele and see if it was accurate?
Yes, it's employee profiles mostly, and we can't practice on casework samples, so we have to use these type of samples for training.
So for training, y'all practice on yourselves, basically?
Yes.
Okay. And you did that for the TrueAllele software in this case as well, and you receive ongoing training?
Yes.
How many items of evidence have you had the opportunity to process for DNA in your career at the GBI?
In the thousands.
How many times have you testified as an expert in a court of law in the field of forensic serology, forensic DNA, and TrueAllele?
Approximately 300 times.
Okay. At this time, Your Honor, the state would tender Ms. Hinkle as an expert in the fields of forensic biology, forensic DNA, and TrueAllele.
Objection. I just renew all the motions that were involved in this, Judge, and reiterate we don't have an expert in this case.
All right. I will allow the witness to testify in the other area of forensic biology, DNA profile comparison, TrueAllele software process.
I want to direct your attention to your case number 2024-1005107. Is that the case number associated with Laken Riley for the GBI?
Yes, it is.
And did you conduct DNA testing in this case?
Yes, I did.
And I want to go item by item to talk about which items you tested, what type of DNA testing you did, your methodologies that you used, and your results. But if you could first globally tell us what types of DNA testing are involved in this particular case with this case number?
The DNA testing consists of what we call traditional DNA testing, where we look at 21 locations along the DNA strand that we use to compare between individuals. Everyone should have a unique profile except for identical siblings. The next type of testing was YSTRs, where we look at 27 locations along the Y chromosome. This allows us to tell if a male individual is present or not present in a DNA mixture where there is too much female DNA that it overshadows the male profile. Also, TrueAllele testing was used.
And in all the types of DNA testing, traditional, YSTR, and TrueAllele, did you follow the GBI's policies and procedures as regards to each of those different types of DNA testing?
Yes, I did.
And of the methods that you used for traditional DNA, YSTR DNA, and TrueAllele DNA, are all of those methods and the methodology that you use generally or widely accepted in your scientific community?
Yes.
Have they been published, the methodology, in relevant scientific journals?
Yes.
Has it been tested, and are those methodologies reliable and reproducible?
Yes, they are.
And were your results in this case, all of your results, peer-reviewed by another scientist?
Yes, they were.
And is that part of the GBI protocols and procedures?
Yes, it is.
And was it followed in this case?
Yes, it was.
I want to start with you let's just go item by item. And we're going to start with the first item, if you don't mind. How about a jacket, item 3 from the crime lab? Did you test, and I've got item 3 here, so one more. Did you test a blue jacket and a cutting from the blue jacket for DNA?
Yes, I tested a cutting from a blue jacket as well as contact swabbings from the blue jacket.
What is contact swabbing?
Contact swabbings are an attempt to attain a profile from someone generally wearing an item of clothing. It doesn't work too well for just touching an item of clothing, but it's someone who has physical contact with their skin and clothing as compared to just testing for bodily fluids.
And I want to ask you that question. So you will do contact swabbing for someone if you believe they wore the item of clothing you just told us. Why doesn't contact swabbing work well for people just touching an item of clothing?
There is a minimum amount of DNA that needs to be present for the testing to be reliable and reproducible. So just touching generally doesn't leave enough skin cells behind to obtain a profile.
I'm going to hand you what's been already admitted as State's Exhibit 147, and there's also a cutting from State's 147. Do you recognize these 2 items? And the cutting, for the record, is 176, and I'll give you some gloves if you need them.
No.
Do you recognize those 2 items?
I recognize 176, yes, and I recognize that it comes from the jacket, although I did not handle the jacket myself.
Because that was done by Katrina before you?
Yes.
Okay, there you go, if you need those. And so can you tell us for the jacket, the cuttings from the jacket, which is 150 again? It's right in front of you.
176.
176. What did you do to 176? What type of DNA testing did you do on the jacket, and what were your results? And if we could start first with the traditional DNA with the cutting.
Traditional DNA testing was where we look at the 21 locations along the DNA strand. Do you want me to go through the process or just?
Sure, go ahead just for one. I don't want you to go through the process for every single item, but for the first one, go ahead.
The first step is to extract the DNA from the material. This is used by taking a small cutting, placing it in a tube with chemicals that help separate the DNA from the other biological material. A robot is used in this step as well. The next step is to quantitate the amount of DNA to see if there is human DNA present. We then make copies along the DNA strand of 21 locations we use to compare between individuals. These locations are different in size, and it's these differences in sizes that help distinguish individuals. These fragments of DNA are separated on an instrument called a genetic analyzer, and it is the software from this genetic analyzer that we use. No, it is the data from the genetic analyzer that we use with the software program to type a profile.
When you conducted testing from the cutting of the jacket, that would have been traditional DNA?
Yes.
What were your results?
There was a partial major profile obtained from the cutting from the jacket, and that matched the profile of Laken Riley. There was also a partial minor profile obtained from the cutting from the blue jacket, and that matched the profile of Jose Antonio Ibarra. There are 2 people contributing to this DNA profile.
Now, since this is a mixture of 2 people, why didn't this go to TrueAllele? Why were you able to do traditional DNA testing on this jacket cutting?
We are able to use other methods to separate mixtures into individual contributor genotypes, which is necessary in order for us to say whether a reference sample matches or not. Sometimes we can't separate mixtures into individual contributor genotypes, so that is when we use the software program.
So do you have a threshold at the GBI in which you send items to TrueAllele versus dealing with them in traditional DNA?
Correct.
Okay. And so the cutting from the jacket, did it fall below the threshold where you had to send it to TrueAllele, or was it above the threshold so you could keep traditional DNA?
It was above that threshold, so yes.
Right. And so did you assign a frequency for the partial profile of Jose Antonio Ibarra for the jacket?
Yes, the partial minor profile was 1 in 9 billion individuals.
And this mixture of Laken Riley and Jose Ibarra on the jacket cutting is just the 2 of them?
Yes.
And prior to, I guess I should ask you this, did you obtain or did you have at the laboratory known DNA samples of Laken Riley,
Yes.
known DNA sample of Jose Ibarra,
Yes.
known DNA sample of Diego Ibarra,
Yes.
and known DNA sample of Argenis Ibarra?
Yes.
The jacket, does that complete the traditional DNA results on the jacket cutting?
There was a probability for the match to Laken Riley.
If you could give us that too.
1 in 10 quintillion individuals.
What about the contact swabs on the jacket? What were your results for that? Were you able to do traditional DNA, or did you have to go to TrueAllele?
Those were a complex mixture that had to go to TrueAllele.
And what were your results? And tell us, for your first TrueAllele results, we're not going to repeat it for every item. How did you move on to the next step for the contact swabs for the blue jacket into TrueAllele? What was that process? What did you do?
The TrueAllele process consists of using the electronic files that are generated by the genetic analyzer, as well as controls that we use in the testing. They are uploaded into a software program. I determine the number of contributors I believe is in a mixture, and then the software performs calculations to assign probabilities for genetic combinations at each of these 21 locations along the DNA strand for each contributor. And at the end, those possible genotypes are compared to a reference sample, and a likelihood ratio is given in the form of a match statistic.
What in general is a likelihood ratio?
Likelihood ratio is a ratio of probabilities. The probabilities of seeing the mixture with one person's reference sample over the population database.
The TrueAllele results from the contact swabbings from the jacket, what were they?
The contact swabbings from the jacket contained a mixture of at least 3 individuals. A match was identified between the major evidence genotype from the contact swabbings from the blue jacket and Jose Antonio Ibarra. a match between the contact swabbings from the jacket and Jose Ibarra is approximately 100 trillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
How many zeros are in 100 trillion?
Billion is 9, trillion is 12, and then it's 100, so it's 14.
What was the results for the other person in the mixture?
Match was identified between a major second major evidence genotype and Laken Riley. That match is approximately 8 quadrillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And you said there were at least, you said how many people in the mixture?
At least 3.
Were you able to make a conclusion regarding other individuals that might be present in the jacket? And I guess specifically, did you compare the known DNA of Jose Ibarra to see if he was present in that mixture?
Yes, I did, because our comparisons are for unrelated individuals. I went ahead and did the comparison to the 2 brothers.
Okay, and what were your results first for Jose Ibarra? Was he present in that mixture?
No, he was not present in the major contributors. The match is approximately 60 quadrillion times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And so does that mean he was excluded?
Yes.
What about Diego Ibarra? Did you look to see if he was in that mixture?
For Diego Ibarra and the profile from the contact swabbings from the blue jackets, he was approximately 10 million times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. For this match likelihood ratio, there is a 5.36% chance of a false exclusion, and that is based on our validation data.
Was Diego excluded?
Yes, he was.
Were your TrueAllele results for the jacket concordant or consistent with your traditional DNA results for the jacket?
They were different samples, but yes.
The same 2 people?
Correct.
I had a very awkwardly worded question. Thank you. It was the same 2 people, both traditional and TrueAllele?
Yes.
All right. Moving on then to gloves, black gloves. Can you tell me, did you have the opportunity to test some black gloves and do DNA testing on those, and what item number would that be for you for the GBI?
I tested swabbings as well as contact swabbings from 3 black gloves. The black gloves are item 2A, 2B, and 2C. The swabbings and contact swabbings were item 6 through item 11.
What were your results?
Each one?
Yes, please. Sorry. You can start with 2A.
2A. The contact swabbings from the black glove contains the DNA profile of at least 2 individuals. The partial major profile matched Laken Riley. The frequency of the partial major profile from the contact swabbings from the black glove to item 7 is approximately 1 in 10 octillion individuals in the population. And due to limited data, I could not make any conclusions about the minor contributor, so that was the data was sent to TrueAllele testing.
Okay. And what were the TrueAllele results?
For the, 2A, item 7, at least 2 individuals. Again, it matched Laken Riley. This time it was 10 octillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. And due to limited data, we still cannot make any conclusions about the minor contributor. When a contributor is less than 4% of the overall mixture, we don't make any conclusions based on our validation.
So you're not able to tell who else is there?
Correct.
Next item, which would be glove 2B. Same questions, same format.
The next one to be item 8. Again, on this one there was a DNA profile of one individual. That profile matched Laken Riley, and the probability was 1 in 500 octillion individuals.
So on one of the gloves, which was 2B, it's just Laken Riley.
Correct.
2C.
2C. Or to be item 9.
Yes.
Two-
The third glove.
Thought we were still on 2B.
I thought we finished 2B. It was just Laken Riley?
2B item 9 was at least one individual, and it matched Laken Riley with 1 in 500 octillion individuals, but there was one additional genetic allele marker. But based on our policy, we couldn't make any conclusions about this one marker.
So would that be inconclusive as well?
For the minor contributor, yes.
Okay. All right. And 2C.
2C, item 11, is at least 2 individuals. The major contributor to this profile from the contact swabbings 2C from the gloves is Laken Riley, approximately 1 in 500 octillion individuals.
And were you able to make any kind of conclusions about anyone else in that one?
Again, due to limited data, no conclusions could be made about the minor contributors, so it also went to TrueAllele testing.
And what were your TrueAllele results?
2C, item 11, again, a mixture of 2 individuals, at least 2 individuals. The major contributor was Laken Riley, 10 octillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. And again, due to limited data, being below 5% mixture ratio, mixture contribution, no conclusions could be made about the minor contributor.
Did you test the fingernails of Laken Riley?
Yes.
How did you do that?
The fingernails were tested for traditional DNA as well as for YSTRs and TrueAllele.
What were Laken Riley's fingernails, her item number, and your unique item number for her case number?
Fingernail clippings from the right hand, item 18A, the swabbings was item 42. The swabbings from the left hand fingernails were item 18B. The swabbings were item 43.
Okay. So did you look at both the left hand and the right hand?
Yes.
Tell us your process and tell us your results, starting first with her right hand.
The right hand, the extraction, amplification, quantitation amplification steps I previously detailed were used. And amplification was performed with the traditional DNA method, and because of the complexity of the mixture, I could not make any conclusions. We went ahead and did YSTR testing as well on the fingernail clippings.
And did you do YSTR testing before you did TrueAllele?
They're kind of at the same time.
So why don't we talk about YSTR first on the right hand, and then we'll move to the TrueAllele for the right hand, and then we'll repeat the questions for the left.
For the right hand, there was the YSTR haplotype was one individual, one male individual, Jose Antonio Ibarra, and Argenis Ibarra cannot be excluded from the YSTR haplotype. from the right-hand swabings and the left-hand swabings. Under the assumption no mutation has occurred, paternal male relatives also cannot be excluded.
So paternal brothers share the same YSTR haplotype, is that the word?
They should, unless there's a mutation.
Okay. And did you actually see a mutation in this particular case?
Yes, there was a mutation in Diego Ibarra's YSTR profile.
And so because of that genetic mutation, were you able to exclude Diego Ibarra as the donor of the male profile underneath Laken Riley's right hand?
Yes.
Okay. And so you could not, under YSTR, exclude Argenis Ibarra, you told us?
Correct.
And you could not exclude Jose Antonio Ibarra?
Correct.
Did the right fingernails go on to TrueAllele?
Yes, I did.
And what were your results in TrueAllele?
Can I state the probability for the YSTR?
You may, yes, sorry.
The YSTR profile has been observed in 29,207 total individuals in the national database, so it is expected to occur approximately in 1 in 9,750 male individuals.
All right. And moving on to TrueAllele.
For TrueAllele, the wet-dry swabbings from the fingernail clippings from the right hand, 18A, item 42, was a mixture of at least 2 individuals. We assumed that the profile of Laken Riley was present when we did the calculations, so there will be no match statistic for her because it's an intimate sample. The DNA match between the wet-dry swabbings from the fingernail clippings from the right hand and the match was to Jose Antonio Ibarra. The match is 10 billion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
Was Diego Ibarra able to be excluded by TrueAllele?
Diego Ibarra's match was approximately 1 billion times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population, with a 5.36% chance of a false exclusion.
Does that mean he was excluded?
Yes.
What about Argenis Ibarra?
Argenis Ibarra, his match was 200 trillion times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. Again, the 5.36% chance of a false exclusion.
And does that mean Argenis Ibarra was excluded?
Yes.
So then moving on to the left hand, and does that complete the results from the right hand?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So that would be, in the right hand, the TrueAllele results would be Laken Riley and Jose Ibarra.
Correct.
Left hand.
Left hand contained a mixture of DNA from at least 2 individuals. Again, the reference of Laken Riley was assumed in the calculations.
And why are you permitted to do that?
Because the DNA is collected directly from her person, so we would expect her DNA to be there so we can make an assumption.
All right, thank you.
Due to limited data, we could not make any conclusions about the foreign evidence genotype from the swabbings from the left hand. So again, that fell under the 4%.
Okay. Moving on then, did that complete both, that completed the fingernails right and left?
Yes.
The straw, did you test a straw for the presence of DNA?
Yes, I did.
And what was that number from your crime of the straw?
The straw was 64B, and the swabbings from the straw was item 66.
What did you do to the straw, and what were your results, or the swabbings from the straw?
The serologist prepared swabbings from the swab that was used to test for her screening, and I used those same swabbings to obtain a DNA profile.
And a serologist in this case, would that be Katrina Osipovich?
Yes.
And so what did you do once you What were your results of the straw then?
The results from the straw was, for the traditional DNA testing, I could not make any conclusions because it was about a 50-50 mixture, so I could not separate the profile into individual contributors.
So then what did you do?
I did TrueAllele.
And what were your results?
The swabbings of the straw contained a mixture of DNA from at least 2 individuals. There was a match from the swabbings of the straw to Jose Ibarra. This is approximately 50 quadrillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And what about the other DNA profiles there in the straw?
The other profiles, Jose Ibarra was excluded from the data from the swabbings, 10 sextillion times less probable than a coincidental match. Diego Ibarra was also excluded, 10 quadrillion times less probable than a coincidental match.
And what about Laken Riley?
She was also excluded, 200 nonillion times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person.
And were you able to, other than identifying a match to the likelihood ratio of Jose Ibarra to approximately 50 quadrillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population, were you able to draw any other conclusions about the profile in the straw?
The profile from the straw, I know it shouldn't be a paternally related male individual because the kit we use contains one YSTR location that we test for, and this one YSTR location was different from both of the brothers and from Jose Ibarra.
Okay.
And it was a male individual.
All right. Did you test a swabbings from an Adidas black hat?
Yes.
What is the hat number for your laboratory, and what did you do?
For the hat, the number is item 39 is the black ball cap, and the swabbings are item item 56.
What did you do to the swabbings, and what were your results?
The traditional DNA testing was performed first, and because of the complexity of the mixture, I could not make any conclusions.
And then what happened to the data from that testing?
The TrueAllele was used on the swabbings from the hat. The black ball cap contained the profile of at least 3 individuals. There was a match from the data from the swabbings from the black ball cap and Laken Riley. This match is approximately 1 octillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. Due to the complexity of the mixture, no conclusive determination could be made as to the minor contributor.
So you can't tell us who the minor contributors are on the hat?
Correct.
But Laken Riley was present on the hat for TrueAllele?
Yes.
Did you test rocks, which would be your items 22 and 23 at the crime lab?
Yes, rocks were tested.
Tell us about that.
There was swabbing from a rock, item 22, and contact swabbings from a rock, item 22, swabbings 58 and 59. And there was also another rock, item 23. Those swabbings were item 60, and those contained the DNA profile of 1 individual, and that profile matched the reference of Laken Riley. The frequency of the profile is approximately 1 in 500 octillion individuals in the population.
Okay. What about the other rock? So only Laken Riley on that item?
Yes. Only Laken Riley in the rock swabs.
Both rocks?
Both rocks.
All right. What about a tree? Did you test swabbings from a tree?
Yes.
And what were your results?
The cutting from the tree was the profile of one individual. That again matched the profile of Laken Riley. Approximately 1 in 500 octillion individuals.
And only Laken Riley on the tree.
Correct.
I want to go back to the fingernails. And you told us on the right fingernails, it was for TrueAllele results, Laken Riley and Jose Ibarra, correct?
Yes.
And are there any other persons present there?
No.
How is it that a person, or under what situations would you expect to find a person's DNA underneath another person's fingernails?
Usually it either has to have some sort of scratching or contact with the inside of the nail. These were shorter nails, so it wasn't like they were long nails that you can just accidentally have contact with. Also, you could have someone's DNA from bodily fluids present in the fingernails.
May I have 1 moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Briefly, the YSTR results for Laken Riley's fingernails for the right hand that, I may be saying this wrong, so you have to correct me, could exclude Diego Ibarra but could not exclude Argenis Ibarra, correct?
For the right and left, yes.
For both. When you go on to TrueAllele, and TrueAllele is able to exclude Argenis Ibarra, and TrueAllele also excluded Diego Ibarra, does that mean he's excluded?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I believe that is all I have, Your Honor. I will pass the witness.
Thank you, Judge.
Good afternoon. Is it Ms. Hinkle?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to go through the list again that I heard you talking about. There's the cup in the straw. Is that right?
There was a straw in the cup.
Okay.
The straw from the cup.
Okay. The straw is what you tested.
Strawberries from the straw, yes.
Okay. And that had to be tested with TrueAllele, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the result was a mixture of 2 people. Is that right?
Correct.
And I'm just going to use for right now, just for simplicity's sake, we have a match with Jose Ibarra.
Correct.
And who was the other person who was in that profile?
It's an unknown male individual. I would need a reference sample to match to that person.
Okay. So we have 2 people's DNA on that straw. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. One Jose Ibarra, one we don't know.
Correct.
Okay. And that's a straw that you're using it's like a regular straw you use to drink?
Yes, it's like a styrofoam takeout cup straw.
Okay. And so 2 people would have had to use that straw in order to get the DNA on there, right?
Correct.
Okay. And we don't know who that other person is.
Correct.
We have the fingernail swabbings. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. On the left and right hand.
Yes.
Okay. And on those, what we start with when we have what we would assume would be the reason you use a YSTR is that only male individuals have a Y chromosome. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And in order to see if you have male DNA in a sample that would otherwise be normally full of female DNA, you're looking for that Y chromosome.
I can tell that there is male DNA from the quantitation step because we also test for male DNA.
Okay.
So I would have to know that the male DNA was present before I amplified with the YSTR kit to find that profile.
Okay. You do that in this situation.
Correct.
Okay. And you get a result that excludes Diego, according to your results,
Correct.
but does not exclude Jose and Argenis.
Correct.
And so there's a match that you make with the YSTR, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. It also doesn't, or I guess the chances of that happening in just the random population is 1 out of every 10,000 people, males, is going to have that same profile. Is that right?
It's approximately 1 in 9,750, yes.
So 1 in 9, it's a match, but 1 in 9,750 is going to, we'd likely see that repeated. Is that right?
Yes, and also paternally related male individuals unless there is a mutation.
Okay, so I'm just going to make a note of that number. It's 1 in 9,750.
Yes.
Okay. The fingernail swabbings of the left hand, there's no, you can't make a match in that. Is that right?
There was also male DNA, so it's the same results as the right hand fingernails.
Okay, is that just the YSTR?
Yes.
Okay. Do you get a TrueAllele result out of the left fingernail?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that?
The TrueAllele was for the right hand Schwabings. There was at least 2 individuals. Laken Riley was assumed. The match to Jose Ibarra is approximately 10 billion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And for the left?
There was, assuming the presence of Laken Riley, due to limited data, no conclusions could be made about the minor contributor.
Okay. So on the left fingernail, we don't have any match. Is that right?
Just the assumption that Laken Riley is there, and she is.
Okay. Not to Jose Ibarra.
Correct.
All right.
Well, except for YSTRs, but yeah, using TrueAllele.
Okay. So we have the Adidas hat.
Yes.
Okay. And there is no match to Jose Ibarra on that hat. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Do we know whose head that hat came off of?
That would be information from someone else. Not.
Okay.
It's not. I'm not aware of.
I got you. And we have the rocks and the tree cutting.
Yes.
Okay. None of those has any of Jose Ibarra's DNA on them, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We would expect for that, if someone were not wearing gloves, or if there were holes in the gloves, would we expect contact DNA in a case?
Not necessarily.
What would it depend on?
Well, it would depend on how much contact they have, the condition of the palms of their hands.
Okay. And when you say the conditions of their palms and their hands, what do you mean?
If your hands have calluses or dry skin, you're more likely to leave contact DNA than soft palms of your hands.
Okay. If it related to a particular object, would it be how hard you grip that?
That could be a part, yes.
Okay. And moving on to the gloves in this case, did you testify about testing number 6 on your?
6 was a complex mixture where no conclusions could be made with traditional DNA testing. so TrueAllele was used.
Okay, and what were the results of number 6?
For number 6, it was the mixture of 2 individuals. The major contributor was Laken Riley, and 100 septillion times more probable than a coincidental match. And again, due to limited data, no conclusions could be made about the minor evidence genotype.
Okay, so that was number 6.
Yes.
All right. Was any of the hair, in this case, that was recovered by, whether from the autopsy or turned over to the FBI, or the GBI, I'm sorry, was any of the hair tested using any traditional DNA methods or TrueAllele?
No.
Okay. And were the fingernail swabbings taken from Jose Ibarra ever tested?
No.
Okay. Who made that decision?
That would have been management.
Management?
The management of in the section, the
Okay.
forensic biology section.
And who's that?
Jim Sebastian.
Okay. And do you have any notes or any reason for that included in your file?
No.
Would those notes have been made when that decision was made?
That would be up to James Sebastian. So he may or may not have made a note as to what we were testing and why.
Okay. Would Preston Norris have been a part of that decision?
There's a Aaron Norris. I don't know a Preston.
Okay. And what about a GBI agent Bayer or Bayer, B-E-Y-E-R? Would he have been a part of that?
I don't know if he was. This wasn't something I was privy to, so I can't say.
Okay. As it relates to items 14D and 14F received by the FBI, or the GBI, I'm sorry. What are those?
They're not on my reports.
Do you have a copy of all of the evidence that was sent to the GBI?
No, I do not.
Okay. Did you ever receive, for testing, a sealed package containing swabs from anyone's abdomen?
They may have been received by GBI, but I did not test those.
Okay. Did you receive any or test any sealed package containing swabs from an abdomen that would have been dry swabbings?
Again, they may have been received by GBI, but I did not perform that test.
Okay. And did you perform any testing on wet swabs from anyone's neck?
No.
Okay. And were you a part of any decision-making process to not test those items?
I was not.
Okay. Do you know who was?
That would have been, again, the management at GBI, and they may have spoken to other people involved in the investigation.
Okay. But you weren't. You're the head person who's in charge of all of the DNA testing in this case. Is that right?
For this case, but not for GBI.
But for this case?
Yes.
Okay. Were you ever consulted by a Preston Norris or GBI agent Bayer as to whether or not to test those items that we just went over?
No, I was not.
Okay. Aside from the jacket, in this case, all of the other matches that you make to Jose Ibarra come through TrueAllele, is that right? And the known sample and the jacket.
Yes.
Okay. And aside from the YSTR,
YSTRs, yes.
Okay. So the YSTR on the fingernail and the jacket are the only non-true allele matches to Mr. Ibarra. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. On direct, you testified. Actually, let me ask you this. Without TrueAllele, then, you personally could, and setting aside the jacket and the YSTR, without TrueAllele, you could not have made any definitive matches in this case. Is that right?
I could possibly match major contributors, but not minor contributors.
Okay. And when you have the minor contributors and the mixed samples, you have to use TrueAllele, right?
If they're minor, below what we call a threshold, where there could be what's called a stochastic threshold, we have to use TrueAllele.
Okay. And so aside from the YSTR and the fingernails and the jacket, all of the minor contributors fell below that threshold in this case, correct?
All the minor contributors did, yes.
Okay. So you had to use TrueAllele for all of those tests?
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to talk to you a little bit. You testified on direct about the reliability and reproducibility of TrueAllele. And I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about that. What are some of the problems and limitations of TrueAllele?
Problems and limitations with very low level DNA. We can't make matches, and that's based on our validation. If there is dropout at one of these 21 locations, it could skew the match statistic. That's another issue. We can only look at mixtures between 2 and 5 individuals. Once you get up to 5 individuals, the software could do what's called stalling, where it has a hard time determining the genotypes. That's something we've encountered.
Okay, so and I'm new to all this, but I think that you went through all the ones that I could find, through my research, and so one of those problems is a determining how many contributors there are. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and any time that you have one of these mixtures of DNA, the scientist has to determine how many contributors there are. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And what they do is they say, okay, we think that there's 2 or 3 contributors to this particular mixture of DNA.
Yes.
Okay. And you plug in that number of contributors, and then the software runs does its thing.
Yes.
Okay. Depending on how many contributors you decide are in there, will change the probabilities, these likelihood ratios that you testified to before, right?
It will change them, yes. If I say there's 3 individuals, but there's actually 2, then it will spread out those probabilities to those other individuals, and there would be a match, but it would have a lower match likelihood ratio.
Okay. And when you're making those determinations to how many contributors there are, the opinion on how many contributors there are could differ. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Amongst people who know this stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay. Other experts, for instance.
Yes.
The other thing you talked about is the quantity of the DNA. Are there limits that you can't go below when you're using TrueAllele?
There's limits we can't go below when we use the traditional testing, so that then applies to TrueAllele as well.
Okay, so are they the same limits between traditional DNA testing and TrueAllele?
Well, since you start with the traditional, that's the limiting factor.
Okay. Who is that limit set by? Is that GBI?
That's GBI, but it's based on our validation of the global Fowler kit that we used for traditional DNA testing.
Okay. What about cybergenetics validation studies? Do they have a limit that you're not allowed to go under?
I'm not aware of that. It would depend on what the amplification was, but not to my knowledge.
Okay. What about separating out these mixtures if it involves close family relations? Are there any limitations on TrueAllele about that?
If it's a lower match, you can have false inclusions with family members, but with the match statistics in this case, and also that we had the reference samples of the two brothers, I don't believe that had any effect on the results.
Okay. And if we kind of control for these limitations, then TrueAllele should be perfect, right? It's just running numbers. Is that fair to say?
Well, it is a random process. So then we do run the software 3 requests each, and we must have 2 requests that are concordant. However, we do have instances where those requests, we don't have concordant requests, and we cannot make any conclusions about a mixture.
I don't understand. What does that mean? It can't, like, it's not concordant. I don't understand what that means. Can you explain that?
Concordant mixture weights and concordant genotypes for contributors we must have before we can make any conclusions. They must be concordant in 2 different TrueAllele requests. So if this doesn't occur, we can't make any conclusions.
Okay. And so, if done correctly then, and I think this is maybe what I'm understanding, that TrueAllele is you testified that it's reproducible. Is that what you were just saying?
Yes.
Okay. But every time you run it, it's going to have a different number, right? I mean, it's going to give you a different likelihood. These huge numbers that you're using, that every time you run it, the numbers are going to be different, right?
They're going to be slightly different because how TrueAllele determines those contributors is a random process.
It's a random process.
Yes, but the results, again, they must be within a certain number of log units or a certain amount difference. There can't be a big difference between the 2 requests for us to report the results.
If you run one of these tests, one run of this test, 5 minutes later you run a different run of this test, are the numbers going to be the same?
Not exactly.
Okay. So it's not exactly reproducible.
It's reproducible within an approximation.
Okay. Who sets that approximation?
That's based on the validation. We do have an amount that they have to be close to each other in order to report the results.
Okay. So in this case, we're comparing the DNA against kind of 3 different individuals. We've got Jose, we've got Argenis, and we've got Diego. Is that right?
Yes, and Laken Riley.
Okay. And I just want to take the right fingernail clipping and just kind of go through the process here. You've got the YSTR, and that's the first test that you do, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that eliminates Diego as a possibility.
Correct.
Okay. And when we go to a TrueAllele test, it says that this is 200 trillion times less probable that it's Argenis. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. But that it's only 1 billion times less probable that it's Diego's.
Correct.
Okay. So that means that according to TrueAllele, it is more likely to be Argenis than it is to be Diego, correct?
Argenis is exclusion number is more than Diego, yes.
So it is. So according to TrueAllele, this is more likely to be Argenis than it is to be Diego.
Yes, but that's more based on the difference in their DNA profiles.
Okay. But you already excluded them with the YSTR, is that right?
I excluded Diego.
Okay, so you excluded Diego, but he's more likely to be the contributor according to TrueAllele.
That's using his DNA reference sample, and it would be based on his profile. It would also be based on how much genetic information he shares with his brother. And so that's not an unexpected result.
Okay. Why do the odds change depending on which test it is in terms of, why isn't it always 200 trillion times more likely or less likely to be Arrhenius and 1 billion times less likely to be Diego?
Because you're comparing to their specific reference samples for them, and it's based on how often their genetic information is found in the random population. So if someone has genetic information that is found more in the population or less in the population, it can change that number. So it's all based on that they have different DNA profiles, so there's different match results.
Okay. The genetic profiles in this case didn't change though, did they?
The mixture was the same, yes.
Okay. And their reference samples didn't change, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you say it's run against the population. Within the course of this case, the population didn't change that much, did it?
No, it's actually the same database.
Okay. So why is it that the odds change? If for the fingernail, for instance, it's 200 trillion times less probable to be Arrhenius, and it is 1 billion times less probable to be Diego, why isn't it always 200 trillion and 1 billion?
Because it's based on the comparison of their reference sample to the data.
But we just said that the reference samples haven't changed, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so the population numbers haven't changed, correct?
Correct.
So why does the likelihood change?
Between the two individuals?
Yes, it's always the same DNA that you're plugging into the machine, right?
Yes, but I mean, if they were identical siblings, they would have identical likelihood ratios. But since they're not identical siblings, the numbers are different.
Sure, but the siblings in this case didn't change between two tests, did they?
They're different tests with different type of results. The YSTR test
Sure.
has different type of results and a different statistical database than the TrueAllele.
Did you say the YSTR has different database than the TrueAllele?
Yes, the Global Fowler and the TrueAllele have the same database, and the YSTR is a different database.